this week's Inside the Capitol. My name is Maggie Hangy. I'm a policy associate here at the Minnesota Catholic Conference. And I'm here with Jason Adkins.
Hey, it's great to be with you for this first Inside the Capitol edition of the 2025 legislative session. Things are just already underway and moving. We've been advocating for quite some time on the issue of sports gambling and gambling expansion. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first, Maggie, say a little bit about what happened today at the Capitol on this first day of session.
Yeah, first day of session. The Senate and House both met. There's a lot of dynamics. I don't know if you've been following them, but a lot of dynamics at play at the Capitol this year. The Senate met, got everything taken care of. The House met, and it was only Republicans there in the chamber. So we'll see how the next few weeks go as those dynamics play out.
Although the legislative dynamics change, our principles don't. And so we advocate for issues regardless of who's in power, Republican or Democrat.
Absolutely. And one of the things we've been advocating for quite some time, or at least last few years, is sports gambling. Jason, do you want to tell us what's been happening on that issue, especially last week?
Yes, well, let me just clarify. We're not advocating for sports gambling. We're advocating against it. And what's really challenging about the sports gambling issue, it's not, people think, oh, this is just betting on the Vikings game or putting some money on the Vikings line. What's being proposed in Minnesota is really putting a sports book in everyone's pocket through their cell phone, online sports gambling. Now, the church isn't against games of chance per se. We have social forms of gambling that are acceptable, bingo, for example, things like that, pull tab, charitable pull tabs and things like that. These things happen even sometimes in church-related venues or parties. Raffles are a form of gambling. They're games of chance. So it's not really about games of chance per se as much as it is this individualized, addictive form of gambling through the cell phone, especially on sports. And we're talking about betting on every form of sports and betting in-game during the game itself. So will the quarterback throw 4 touchdowns during the third quarter? That level of minutia. So what you see, that's the most highly addictive form of gambling. And that's where people start chasing their losses. So we think this is a predatory industry, and we're trying to prevent its legalization here in Minnesota. We think it adds very little benefit to the state with a huge amount of cost and sometimes people think, well, it just affects the gambler, let them spend their money how they please, it's recreation, it's entertainment. Well, the reality is that in a recent study of 700,000 online sports gamblers by Southern Methodist University, fewer than 5% came away with winnings. And did you know they can kick you off the platform if you actually prove yourself to be able to beat the algorithm or beat the house? So I think people need to really investigate this issue, see how predatory this industry is. It's not another poison we don't want to add into the ecosystem of our state. We don't need to legalize and normalize another vice industry.
Absolutely. And last week, session started today, but there was a pre-session hearing on sports betting and all the harms that could be caused by it. And I was especially moved by some of the testimony shared towards the end of the hearing, just about parents gambling away college funds and other things. So not only does it affect the person who's gambling, but it impacts their children, it impacts their parents. Often in these testimonies, their businesses and any other people really in their sphere.
Yes,
really
it's going
harmful.
to add cost to, talk about the families that it impacts, family fragmentation, suicide rates go up, calls to gambling hotlines in the states who've legalized it have exploded. We're just really creating a whole mess of problems we don't even realize yet. And the social experiment as it continues to unfold across the United States, not showing good data. The state doesn't need to rush into this right now. We can take a time out, we can pump the brakes on this issue, see how it continues to evolve in other states before we jump into this industry from which very little money actually goes into the state, despite the fact that it creates so many problems that the state's going to have to address: bankruptcies, human services cost, funding gambling addiction helplines and hotlines and services for those, and who at the end of the day is going to benefit. We already gave that statistic about how few people actually beat the house. So sports gambling and the online sports gambling, we really need to pay attention to that issue going forward, something that we're very, very concerned about here in Minnesota, and something that folks in the Catholic Advocacy Network should be thinking about and talking to their legislators about in particular.
Right, absolutely. And there's all sorts of issues that we'll be talking about that you guys will hear about in these weekly videos throughout session. We're going to try to do one of these every week. Sometimes we'll bring in guests. Sometimes it'll be Jason and I. And one thing we're also doing on a monthly basis is First Friday Adoration. You can come to the Capitol. It's so important not only to show up and to meet with your legislators, to send the email through the Catholic Advocacy Network, but also to pray for your legislators, to pray for the work at the Capitol. As St. Benedict says, or at Labora, we need to work and we need to pray. And we're offering that to you every first Friday. January to May happens in the Governor's Dining Room from 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. And if you RSVP on our website ahead of time, you can get a parking pass. We can help get you over there if you need assistance, directions, whatever. We're here to help in that capacity, but we really encourage you to come join us.
There's so much complaining about politics, and at the end of the day, you can light a candle or you can curse the darkness. Which one is it going to be? We're inviting you through the Catholic Advocacy Network to do the work with us, to join us in that work of advocating for good public policy, and inviting you into that reality and the importance of prayer. We have to root everything in prayer, so we're making adoration available. You can intercede for our legislators, intercede for our state. We can recognize Jesus' lordship over all the public spaces, including the Capitol. He is king, and we have to bring about his providential care into all of creation, including the laws that are made in the state. So already, even though today's the first day, the work has been happening. We talked about that gambling hearing last week. We've already had adoration of the Capitol. That's going to happen going forward. So again, as Maggie said, stay tuned. Be a part of the Catholic Advocacy Network. You can keep up on what's going on in the Capitol. We'll be apprising you of the big issues that we're going to see. Some of those: assisted suicide, commercial surrogacy legislation. We're looking at reforms to marijuana laws, looking at more school choice and bringing more school choice to the state of Minnesota.
Expanding the child tax credit.
Expanding the child tax credit. So a lot of really important work. Some issues that are literally life and death. So those are the big things that we need to be thinking about and concerned about. It's not just about what happens in Washington. What happens in Minnesota really matters too. So thanks for joining us on this first issue of Inside the Capitol, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.